Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on less stress, more strategy, mastering mindfulness during COVID-19. Bit of a tongue twister, that one. I'm glad I got that one out. Now, my name's Dave Newick. I'm the Managing Director of Arken.legal. And if you've been to a webinar before with Arken.legal, then you'll probably know your way around. But just to remind you, or perhaps if you're new, very warm welcome to you all. Then you've got a panel up to the right-hand side here, which really gives you the opportunity to get involved in the webinar, and we actively encourage that, so that you know how to do that. You can go to the chat area and you can enter in any questions that you have, and Jenny's going to certainly give you that opportunity. Now, the other thing to mention, of course, is that if, again, you've been in a webinar with us, then you'll see that we're in a slightly different format this time. So hopefully you're seeing two video screens, myself and Jenny Robinson. So you've kind of got the rose and the thorn there going on. So this is very much an interview, but I have absolutely no doubt that Jenny's going to be asking me as many questions as I'm asking her. But clearly you really want to hear from Jenny. That's the reason that you're here. So thank you for your participation, and a very warm welcome to you, Jenny.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, Jenny has a wide range of interests and has had a fascinating life, and I think there's some context here, so I just want to do a little bit of a bio on you first, Jenny. Now, amongst other things, you farm alpacas. That's correct, isn't it?
I do, yes.
Yes, that's one of those things that you do on your farm up there somewhere in Hertfordshire, I think it is, isn't it? So,
20 miles northeast of Oxford, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, brilliant. So to all those people who are north of London, you'll understand and know where that is. Now, Jenny is coming from a background of consulting, so she's been involved in lots of different organisations over many years, and is now a coach and has written a book, in fact, co-authored a book called Coaching on the Go, leading your team in less than 10 minutes a day. And we're going to refer to that later on. So, and Jenny, you're also doing your PhD on mindfulness. So you're going to be defending your thesis before very long.
Yeah, so my topic is mindful leadership. So I think we'll use the two elements of that today. So we'll look at mindfulness and we'll look at leadership. And I'm defending my thesis in about 6 months, so you might find that I get a bit academic from time to time, but I'm really sure you can pull me back and make me turn my academic stuff into stuff that's relevant and practical and useful for anybody who's on this webinar, because I'm really committed to making this not just an academic treatise, but of use to everybody who's joined us today. So please hold me to that. You keep me accountable.
I absolutely will do. And look, could you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? So your business is about coaching, of course, but it's also about motivation, performance, and leadership.
Yeah, so I used to be a partner of a global consulting firm called Towers Perrin. I was an equity partner, and in 2002 I decided to take the leap and set up my own firm. So I've been in business for myself since 2002. I think I have started and built about 5 different companies starting from the age of 18. My first company was a commercial radio station, and wow, it's still going. Ah. And then I came to the UK. I started another organisation. I was bought out by a very large conglomerate. I was in my late 20s when I was bought out, and I suffered all sorts of, you know, swings and arrows of outrageous fortune, because somebody comes to you when you're very young and gives you a lot of money, but there's a lot of strings attached. So yes. I went through all of that, and then I came out of being self-employed to being part of a very large corporation. Then I went into another large corporation. Then I've been back into sort of starting my own again. I have a couple of other little side companies as well. And I think I am best described as an entrepreneur, stroke academic, stroke social activist, I think. And all of those come together in this idea of mindfulness and leadership. So,
fantastic.
but I think, sorry, I just thought about what's relevant about all of that. And this day, so you're just going to have to cut through me. This is too key. So I should say I've got the same accent as Dave, so I'm a Kiwi too, and we're not known for being shy as a nation, right? So the important thing is that I think why I emphasize that I have both worked for myself, started businesses, and worked in global corporations is it gives me unique insight into three different aspects. Firstly, when you are self-employed or starting a business, you go to bed every night worrying about, firstly, whether you can make payroll every month. You know, are you going to be able to pay everybody? And then you worry about, can you even pay yourself to keep the roof over your head?
Yes.
And then when you go into a global corporation, your worries change to other things. You become interested in, you know, who's your boss and who are the clients and how are you working with your teammates and how do you network and how do you work effectively? And so I've flip-flopped from both of those sides, from worrying about paying everybody else to worrying about how I am as a team player. And as a consultant, I have then had the third experience, which is going into organizations and really understanding their culture, their context, and their challenges, and trying to give them useful, practical ways of being better.
Yes.
So that's given me unique insight into the tech sector, the finance sector, the insurance sector, and large pharma as well. Oh, and petrochemicals as well.
And to cap it off, your husband is a lawyer.
And my husband is a lawyer, yeah.
Right. Yes, which will resonate with many of the people that are here. Now, just to touch on the Kiwi aspect, fantastic to be interviewing a fellow Kiwi, and also to prove something to you. Yes, Jenny and I are related. So there you go. Just got to show that in New Zealand, we're only 2 steps removed from one another. Now, Jenny, mindfulness, it's one of those things that perhaps we need to dispel some myths around. So, you know, it's not all about holding hands and singing Kumbaya, is it?
Yep. So I think there's a couple of myths about mindfulness I'd like to dispel right from the outset, and there's a couple of unique benefits that I want to dangle as carrots for anybody who's on this, so that it encourages you to stay with us. And actually, Dave and I said that what we'd do is at 3 o'clock, if you're interested, and if you want to stay online, I'll run a little practice. So, you know, we'll close at 3 on the subject, if you like, and at 3, then we'll roll on to the practical, or you know, some experiential things. So the one thing I want to say about mindfulness, or the two things, number one, it's not always with your eyes closed, sort of sitting in this perfect Zen-like position, right? We do some of that, but it's not necessary. That is sort of the crucible of the training if you really want to gain clarity and focus. But actually, any activity, anything that you are doing in your life can become part of your mindfulness. The second thing is to say that mindfulness is actually very relevant and very useful in organizational life and in work life. So it's good for you in your personal life, but it's really great in your organizational life, and particularly if you're leading, because it helps you to be more strategic, hence the title of our talk today, and it helps you to make better decisions. So it can reduce personal stress, it can reduce professional stress, but more importantly, or as importantly, it can help you to be more strategic and make better decisions. So.
Absolutely, and look, that's signposted the webinar beautifully, because we are going to talk about all those aspects. We're certainly going to talk about the stress piece. I think that's really important. We're talking about leadership strategy, and we're also going to talk about how mindfulness can assist us with this time, obviously, that we're in, because that is the absolute context, and that's the reason we've been putting all these webinars on, is to try and help you, our clients, and the other people in our community through this very challenging time. So we're going to talk also about the way that mindfulness can assist with people that are around us, some of our teams, perhaps our clients, our families, other people in our communities as well. So let's turn our hand to the stresses. Now, we're in this unique time, aren't we, Jenny? And it's got its own stresses and its own strains. And we're now, I think, 8 or perhaps even 9 weeks into a lockdown phase with only a partial release of that over the last week or so. So what are some of the stresses that you think people are experiencing, and how can mindfulness help people with dealing with that?
Yeah. So I want to acknowledge that everybody's experience of this is very different. So we will talk generally today because that's what you have to do when you're doing this stuff.
Yes.
But you know, if anybody's sitting on this webinar thinking that's not my experience, then I completely honour that. I have talked to people who range from just at 10 o'clock this morning, I had an online coffee with a girlfriend, and I said to her, "How are you?" And she said she's flourishing. She's absolutely, you know, loving this, relishing it. And then I talked to other people who are very overwhelmed. And the one that comes to mind is a client I spoke to last week, and she's very senior in the city. She's got a large team. She's expected to jump online immediately and you know, adapt to the new working environment. She's under a great deal of pressure because the organization is having to rescale and make decisions now which will affect the long-term future of the organization, and she's right at the heart of those decisions. And so she's online 12 hours a day on Zoom, on WebEx, and then she's got a 5-year-old son who needs homeschooling and home entertaining, and she's right at her wit's end. And so the way she copes with this is she picks up the iPad and dials up Peppa Pig and passes it to the kid. And then she said to me that she was distraught because she then beat herself up for being a bad mother, and she had convinced herself that she had done irreparable damage to her child by handing him an iPad for 8 hours and consistently doing that, you know. And I think that there's therefore the original stress, the original situation. There's the stress that we put ourselves on to cope with that, and then there's even a third level of stress, which is the judgments we make about the decisions. So, you know, have I been a good mum today? Have I been a good boss today? Have I been a good co-worker today? And so just another note on that is the other thing I hear people saying is they're making a huge amount of judgment on themselves for not being very efficient. They have this template in their head that now that they're not commuting to the office, and now that everything's just neatly packaged into, you know, video conferencing, that they should have a list which is a mile long, and they should just plow through it as if they're robots. You know, why aren't they getting through all that work? And then they're sitting at the end of the day, and there's a couple of things. One is they're saying they're exhausted, and then number two is they're saying, I didn't get half of it done. I can't understand why I'm being inefficient. So I'm going to shut up and ask if there's anything in that you want to explore, because I can expand on all of that. But that's just the lay of the land as I see it.
Yes. Well, look, I think a lot of people are feeling exactly what you're explaining there, and I think particularly the stresses around parenting at home and having a full workload are very, very difficult. And of course, the context, the situation that we're in, has dislocated everything that we know, particularly as leaders, I think, and we're going to come to that in a moment. And on that basis, there's just so much to cope with, isn't there? So mindfulness in that way, do you have any sort of takeaways or tips that you could provide to deal with the stress element? I think we're going to come on to the other pieces in a moment, but what would you say to the participants is something that they could take away from the webinar today in that area?
Yeah. So the other thing, I'm just going to finish another thought that popped up, and then I'm going to go back to the tips or the helpful ways of doing it. that idea that we should be more efficient, or at least as efficient as we were, you know, in the history of February, whenever.
Yes.
I really want to kind of lay that to rest and put it into some context. If you are on screen or on the phone all day, it is quite likely that you're pouring quite a lot of energy into connecting and relating to the people who are on the other side. And that is something that we don't invest in quite to that extent when we're just in the office and walking around, or you know, rubbing shoulders with people in a more natural way. I think we naturally kind of understand that for us to have a meaningful connection, which is entirely possible through the screen. Again, I hear lots of people saying, oh, it's just not the same. You know, I really like to smell, you know, I really like the sense. And I think we'll come on to this when it comes to leadership.
Yes.
But it is entirely possible to have a connection and to form a bond with somebody through the screen. It takes more effort, it takes more thoughtfulness. And this is kind of at the essence of mindfulness, is how do we use our energy and how do we think about what it is we're doing. So just to go back to, don't be surprised if you're exhausted.
Yes.
Don't be surprised if, you know, you're giving your child an iPad for 8 hours a day, and, you know, don't be too harsh on yourself about that. So, you know, resist making judgments about I'm terrible, or I should be the should, must, ought. They're really dangerous words at times like this, you know, and yet our mind can tell us that. It's a load of phooey, but our minds can tell us we should be doing this, we ought to be doing this, we must be doing something else. So should, must, and oughts are really unhelpful mindsets to have. So you said, could I give some tips? I want you to know that there is a biological response. I will talk quite a bit through this about sort of a mind-body connection. So we all know that if our body has a reaction, it closes down our mind. But equally, if our mind closes down, our body closes down. So the two systems work very well and in a very interconnected way. So, for example, if I said to you, do you like going on a roller coaster? I hate it. You know, for me, that's purgatory. The idea of going on a roller coaster is just madness. But I know people pay a lot of money to go on a roller coaster, right? And so what is different between that experience? My body and your body go on the same roller coaster. It's just as high, it's just as steep, it's just as, you know, pulling 2G or whatever it is going around the corner. But if you love it and I hate it, what happens is, if I hate it, all the stress hormones that are in my body take hours and hours to go. Yes. It's really simple. It takes hours for our bodies to get rid of the stress hormones. But if you love it, those stress hormones are gone in 20 minutes. So as soon as your mind tells your body, this is fun, I can be playful, it is an experiment, it has a really profound effect on the flight and fight syndrome, which is always going on between our brain and what's called the vagus nerve. So really simple. First tip, if you're stressed, know that you're stressed. So yes. I'm going to ask people on the chat button, tell me, how do you know when you're stressed? So yes. I'll tell you how, this is really cool. When you begin to look at it, it's really, really cool. So I am a grown-up person, quite old, and I grew up learning to write. But when I'm stressed, you watch my handwriting fall to pieces. So sometimes I am in a meeting and I'm writing a note and I look at my handwriting and I think, that is dreadful. That is now a signal back to myself. Oh my goodness, right, pay attention. You're feeling it, right? Something's triggering you. So if you're stressed, know you're stressed. Know your signs of stress. Don't give yourself a hard time. It's quite natural. Stress is a good thing. It's really a helpful reaction to have because it primes you. It keeps you alert. So don't think stress is bad. But then also think about the circumstances that are creating that stress and have a slightly more playful attitude or a slightly more experimental attitude. Think about that roller coaster and don't frame everything as catastrophe or disaster. You know, just think about it more fully. So I'm not saying become Pollyanna. You know, I think Pollyanna was the fictitious little girl who had pigtails and always thought it was going to be fantastic. But you know, you can look around a corner and see that there's something there that you'd like to experiment with or play with. So, you know, those are really simple things. Know what your signs of stress are and how you know. I asked somebody that once and they said they trip over. Their little sign to themselves that they were stressed is they became quite clumsy and tripped over.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, isn't it? Great.
And for me, I don't mind sharing this. I've experienced executive. I've been through many tricky and difficult situations, businesses that were close to collapse, warring shareholders, very tricky divestment and acquisitions, lots of different things. And yet this process has been really difficult for me. I'm noticing that, in fact, for the first time in my life ever, my jaw is aching.
Yeah.
And I find myself waking up in the night or waking up in the morning, and my jaw is really clenched, really tight. And yet I wouldn't have thought that I'm particularly stressed, but in fact it's just my body's way of reacting to the situation that we're in. And so I think there's this kind of whole, I'm not quite sure of the description, but this whole effect going on underneath your immediate gaze. It's not necessarily about the complexities of work, but there's just so much going on that you're having to cope with.
Yes, absolutely. And again, that's the point I would make about you can be flourishing in this time. You can be absolutely relishing it, but no person is an island. So with the world beginning, to fracture and different things beginning to play out, of course we're going to feel that. Why wouldn't we have some sort of reaction to it? In fact, you'd be flip it around, right, and say, well, wouldn't you be a strange fish if you were completely unaffected? If you were completely, yeah, I'm fine. You'd be a sociopath probably.
Yes.
In this case, it's kind of indicating that you're connected to the world, you care about the world. That this is important.
It matters. Yes. Yeah. Look, let's move on to the leadership aspect, because I know that a lot of the people here are going to be leaders of their own firms, whether they're a one-person band or perhaps they're managing partners in some large organizations or have senior roles in law firms or different client groups. Now, obviously things are different, aren't they? And this whole COVID and lockdown situation has brought about its own sort of leadership challenges. In the same way that we explored that for individuals and around stresses, what are your thoughts around some of the challenges of leadership in this period, and how can mindfulness be effective, but particularly with reference to strategy, of course, because it's a time that we really should be thinking about strategy.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with the stress response is that our field of view narrows. There's some really good psychological research on this that shows us we already have what's called a confirmation bias, which is we select facts to support our view rather than forming our view on the basis of facts. So that's already happening. But if you then add stress, it narrows what we see. So the data that's coming into us and being taken into consideration is vastly reduced. If you think about it, if you're in a fight or flight situation, your brain has turned very binary. All it cares about is this an existential threat, and how do I get through it? It's not actually concerned with a whole range of choices. So the more stressed we are, the more our field of view narrows. And in addition to that, what gets triggered, especially if we are leaders, or especially if we are high achievers, or especially if we're known as sort of an A-type personality, is we have this really deep-rooted need to fix things, to find solutions, to move things forward, to break through any barriers, you know, to be the one who resolves the issues. And many of us, if you think about it, have either been promoted or rewarded for having that tendency. You know, as soon as you're a self-starter, everything in this world reinforces the fact that you're doing the good things. You know, you're building businesses, you're building clients, you're building relationships, you're a rainmaker.
Yes.
And so deep inside of us, we have two things which are coming together at this time, and one is that we're narrowing the data that we use, and we're going too fast to fix things, and that is a pretty poisonous combination. We can too quickly rush to fix things that either don't need fixing right away or need a wider range of data, a wider range of input. And so really simple tools for you, or techniques for you to use. Number one, stop. You know, stop,
Yes.
stop, stop. Yeah, make some space, make some time. You know, take some, take a walk, whatever. Take a day, take a week, take a month. You know, things don't always need solving right away. So number one, make some space, make some time. Number two, find some good collaborators, find other people who have counter views to yours, who'll challenge you, who'll brainstorm with you, who'll widen the range of possibilities. Now, and the third thing is make it playful. Again, I go back to this idea of the roller coaster. If you can be experimental, then what you're doing is you will widen the range of things that become apparent. And it's so mindfulness sits at the intersection of evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and some basic human psychology and teams, probably. So it's a really nice mix of everything coming together. And we do know that we're wired for collaboration. It generates all sorts of great feelings when it goes well. And it will actually spark the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain where you have what we call higher order thinking. That is, you're able to deal with more complex problems, you're able to deal with more complex data, but it's also associated with happiness. So the interesting thing is, when you're working at your best, you know, when you're really kind of flying high, that's also when you feel great. So, you know, the two things are very aligned. It's a wonderful thing, our brain, once you understand it.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. And so in terms of leaders and thinking about the strategic piece, obviously things like this COVID pandemic definitely have the challenges, but they will certainly have opportunities as well. Now, how can you use mindfulness to be more aware of yourself as a leader? How can you use mindfulness to be more aware of perhaps some of the opportunities? And I, by the way, fully agree with the stop analogy and lesson.
So before I answer your question, I'm going to turn the tables. We said this was a dialogue, and I've for 29 minutes already. I haven't asked you a question. So how do you, first question to you, how do you stop? And once you've stopped, then what do you do? Because it's one thing to say to people, stop, but tell us how you do it.
Yeah, so look, for me, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to finish the job, and I was on garden leave because I was going to competitors, and I had 3 months of paid leave, and I decided during that time that I would go and walk the Camino, which is one of my bucket list things that I really want to do. And without kind of boring with the details of that, what I found through that process, which was really, I just wanted to go and do it, but actually I discovered myself, I was very burnt out, been running a football club as well as a very full-on CEO job, and I was as close to the wall as I had ever been. And so the simple process of putting one foot in front of the other and emptying my mind of anything and just being open to, when you're in Portugal and Spain, the smell of the eucalyptus and the extreme heat, and the birds and the things that are around you, the wind rustling through the trees. Sounds all very hippie-ish, but actually for me, I over a month I walked 450 k's, and I began to just go through this entire sort of sloughing off process. It was quite cathartic of getting rid of a whole lot of baggage, and then moving on and being able to kind of start to just be receptive to new ideas. And I came back from that, and I was, in my wife's words, really annoying, because I've been through this far. What I should say is probably more annoying, you know. But so for me, to answer your question, I now have this fortunate situation where I live 10 minutes away from any woods, and as soon as I get ready to go walking and I sit outside the door, the simple process of putting one foot in front of the other is really cathartic and therapeutic for me. And as soon as I get into the woods, I go straight back to where I was, and I find that really relaxing. So I do that pretty much every day, 3 to 5, sometimes 8 miles a day, and then I'll come back to the office, and I wouldn't have been thinking about anything, but and I try not to, but sometimes you do. But often I find that a lot of the challenges, a lot of the complexities, a lot of the things that I've been grappling with through the day, trying to be, strategic at one moment, thinking about global expansion strategies, and then down the detail the next, and then back up to strategy, and that now I've got some clarity and some shape to that, simply through that process of stopping and not thinking.
Yeah. So I'm just going to draw out the lessons of your story, because I think they perfectly illustrate a couple of top tips. Top tip 1 is, well, I'd say the fact that you have kind of turned it into a practice, a deliberate practice, is a really cool thing, and many people don't appreciate just how helpful that can be. It doesn't matter what the practice is, what matters is that it matters to you, right? So, yes. The point about mindfulness is, as I say, it's not always sitting on your cushion with your eyes shut, being in nirvana. It is, though, about being very deliberate about what you're doing and using whatever it is you're doing as a way of refining your consciousness, of refining your ability to be fully present to whatever's in your life. So number 1, you've turned it into a practice. Number 2 is you pretty much do it every day. Number 3 is that you don't go into your practice with, I've got this problem and I expect to have the problem solved by the time I finish my walk, which is, again, often a mistake people make, is they think, right, I will set myself a problem at the beginning of this run, and I expect by the end of my run I must have finished, I must finish my run and finish the problem, and then there's a sense of disappointment. Well, that didn't work, so sometimes the resolution doesn't come on demand. Often the resolution comes when we have the patience to peel back the layers, to just be with the problem for a while. I do have another practice, however, where I contradict all of the things I've just said. It is a daily practice, and it is, mindful, because I'm doing it deliberately and with intention. But I will often have a shower, and the shower is my happy place. It's one of my happy places, and I will intentionally take a problem, and I'll kind of empty the hot water tank until I've got the answer, or maybe not the answer, but I've widened the range of possibilities, and that's really, again, a mindful thing. But it doesn't matter. It can be attached to anything. When we were putting on the Olympic Games in London in 2012, I worked with one of the biggest teams associated with that, and we scaled up from 10 people to 10,000 people in about 8 months. So it was a real roller coaster. And you know, I worked with all the leaders about how to maintain their equilibrium and their sense of equanimity. And we used to say that as you walked along the corridor from one meeting to the next, you know, just the very walk could pull them into the present moment, leave behind that last meeting, get ready for the next meeting, you know, because otherwise you carry all the garbage from the last one into the next one. And if your last meeting was rubbish, then the next one's going to be rubbish. So how do you have a clean slate each time? You asked me a question and I've completely forgotten it, which is very unmindful. I'm aware of that.
Look, it's about the
leadership.
Yeah, strategy and leadership, because I think one of the things that this COVID and lockdown process or period has really disrupted and made difficult for people is that their normal working patterns are different. And of course, you know, if you've got kids at home, then that makes it all the more complex. But if your normal routines are different, and we've heard from different people that, you know, they used to have that period to wind up as they drove to work and unwind at the end of the day, and of course, you know, they're not getting that anymore. For me, I find that, you know, I am a very empathetic, I'm a very instinctive, gut feel kind of a leader, and much like your example earlier, I have struggled to adapt to the fact that I don't get the ability to read people and to pick up on those nuances and that eye contact, and to see, you know, where they're at and how they're reacting to stuff, and what emotions they're at. You know, are they happy? Are they sad? Are they demotivated, down on energy? Is there something wrong? And that's always been my strength. And that's actually quite difficult then when you don't have that, and it's a different form of disruption that's been caused by COVID. I think, you know, mindfulness and our ability to kind of use tips and techniques as leaders can be very useful. So have you got any other kind of thoughts around that at all, Jenny?
So I think the job of a leader has now increased. So not only are you leading the organization, you are a relationship manager, and a thoughtful relationship manager. And I'm going to ask you in a minute another question about how you are doing this. But I think that a key thing as a leader is to keep sensing where other people are in their lives, right? Because if their life is, quite frankly, difficult, then the work that they turn in for you is also going to suffer. So the two things that cannot be disconnected, the whole person comes to work. And I think that as a leader, one of the key things we can do right now with our teams is just simply ask them the simple question, how are you? And by the way, when they say fine, and they kind of become very British about, yeah, I'm fine, you know, whatever. We're slightly more persistent. We're slightly, you know, are you? You know, because not everybody is. And maybe sharing the I'm grinding my teeth at night story, you know, because there's nothing like a bit of sharing from you, a bit of vulnerability from you to encourage other people to come forth with their real experience of day-to-day life. So number one is asking the question, and then number two is zipping up, which I'm not very good at, but I'm really teaching myself and teaching others to just listen and soak it up, and don't fix it, and don't necessarily reassure. You know, there's nothing worse than somebody saying to you, you know, I'm not sleeping very well, I'm finding it really difficult to concentrate, and you're straight in with some pop psychology about, have you tried this? All that shows is that, you know, you're trying to fix them, and that they're a problem and you're going to fix them. Much better to just say, you know, I really hear you. You don't need to do it in that crass American way, but, you know, say, I've heard a lot of people are struggling to sleep, or that seems to be quite normal or quite natural given the circumstances we face. So really just being with whatever is the problem them. And of course, if people are flourishing, celebrating it.
Yes.
There's a lovely story about our brain which says, and we'll come to this a bit in a minute, but our mind is like Velcro for bad things, and it's like Teflon for good things. And
Yes.
one of the most helpful things we can do is when we find a joyful moment for ourselves or for others, is really to pause and celebrate that wonderfulness. So if somebody says, you know, I had a great day yesterday because, you know, don't go all British and, you know, self-deprecating. Lavish praise on them, lavish good feeling on them, amplify it, because goodness knows everybody is having every other dreadful thing amplified. So your job as a leader is to foreground good stuff when it happens. And
Yes.
also, I think it's to be positive within the bounds of reason, you know, not to be just a sort of la-di-da, you know, hippy-dippy thing, but really to say that any opportunity, you know, any challenge like this brings with it opportunities, and there's an opportunity for everybody here to pivot or to make change or to reconsider their business from the ground up, or to take some real big decisions that you've been procrastinating on, not in a hurry and not by yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, but you know, there's some fantastic opportunities here, I'm sure, and other people will be seizing them. So go after it. Yeah. So I was going to ask you the question. How do you do it? What do you do to stay connected to your team, to get a sense of how they are, to understand the mood, even though people are working at home?
Yes, so for me, obviously, I've shared before that I'm instinctive and empathetic, and so what we've done is to formalise that. So what we've done is to introduce stand-ups at the start of every day. So there's one for the technical team, one for the commercial team, and then one at the end of the day as well. And then we have a leadership meeting twice a week. And one of the interesting things, just in terms of vulnerability as a leader, is that, and I'll just again share this, is that I have always found that, and I've learned through many, many years, that the best way to be as a leader is to be aloof. And so I'm very guarded about what I've shared with people over the years, because I find that I'm not here to be people's friends. You know, that is the golden rule. And so this time, obviously, you need to be more vulnerable and you need to share more of yourself, and that on its own is actually something that you need to get used to. But when you do that, what you find is that they share more with you, because you're being vulnerable. That's kind of one of my great learnings out of this. But generally, if you had to kind of put a word on it, it would be that we've become more agile. So we're using stand-ups. And I know that in your experience in consulting, Jenny, that you've come across and advised and worked with different teams who have pivoted and because they've had to, and have started to adopt different work practices, and in those work practices is some mindfulness.
Yeah, so I was working in the tech sector, so I worked in Google for a few years, and the tech sector has gone beyond the idea of agile. So they've begun to talk about this idea of liquid organizations where everything is much more fluid and dynamic and responsive and self-organizing. So, you know, if you make the assumption, and I think this is a good assumption in your industry, that you're employing bright, intelligent people, you know, they don't need telling what to do all the time. They can take a good guess as long as they understand some core principles. Well, you know, if you take that and think about, you know, here's a problem, could we get people to just self-organize around a problem? Or here's a client with a request, could we get people to self-organize? How would that look? So the tech industry obviously is way ahead on this because they've got the benefit of tech. But the pharma industry, we were talking about this about 6-7 months ago with pharma, looking at what would it take for them to become not just agile, but liquid. And they're a long way off. But the really cool thing is that thinking, which was begun 6 months ago, has really paid dividends, because in the rush to find the vaccine, and if we do find a vaccine, we've got to produce not just, you know, 60 million squirts of the vaccine for the UK, but we've got to be able to vaccinate the world in order to make the world safe. You know, so mass producing this vaccine is going to be a huge manufacturing problem. So they are working in parallel. You know, these organizations are now absolutely not working sequentially as they used to, but they're really lockstep. And so as the vaccine is being trialed and tested, all the manufacturing that the pharma companies will need to do is being also trialed and tested. So it's just amazing. I forget why I was telling that story.
Yes, no, because the key takeaway there is that, and I think if I liken this to the legal sector, is that there are opportunities here. And by being mindful of those opportunities, by getting ourselves to a place where we can start to think about some of the strategic aspects in time and in space, rather than having this kind of huge amount of stuff coming at us in this chaos, and you know, we probably expect more of that to happen, this volatility in the markets and all sorts of things. But actually in the legal sector, that this is an opportunity to start thinking about the ways in which we work. And it may well be that, for example, if conveyancing is going to be quieter, then some of those conveyancing solicitors then start to move into estate planning. And perhaps there's an opportunity, given the disruption of COVID to the legal sector, to actually start thinking about, well, what could we do to work better? And the opportunity included in that is mindfulness, I believe, is how can we be better leaders? How can we have less stress? How can we do things? And it's not just a case of saying, oh, well, we're going to work from home. You know, there's more to it than that, isn't there?
Yeah. So it points to something that's really central to mindfulness, which is a learning orientation. And the reason I was talking about the tech sector to the pharma sector is, for example, this idea that other industries have something to teach us, even the most, you know, and in fact, when we used to do this at Shell, we used to create different scenarios by colliding different realities together. So, you know, put together estate and conveyancing or something alongside car manufacturing, or you know, just choose something absolutely at random and have some fun thinking about what would that look like, what would that teach us, you know, how do we pivot around that, you know, so just clash different things together. And this learning orientation, this ability to have a more flexible mindset, to include more data, to have a wider range of opinions, is really fantastic. And again, the research says that this will be the fastest way to reduce your stress, the fastest way to reduce your staff's stress, is because quite unusually, when you're learning, you can't be fretting, if you like. So you know, I think the great task of leadership right now is to set up sort of an environment where people can take some of the future problems of the organization, have some fun, intellectual fun, just play it out. You know, what would it look like? How would that work? How could we benefit? Just da-da-da-da-da. And then you can all stand back and say, well, what do we learn? What do we like? Pick and choose. You know, that's the nature of strategy. But the really, really important thing is this idea of don't do it alone and don't restrict the data. You know, so use everything. So that
break down some of those hierarchical structures and be open-minded to other approaches.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to just touch on is the impact that this could have on what's often called the war for talent. So, you know, any professional services firm lives or dies by the quality of the people that they can attract and retain. We all know that. And we have a new breed of people coming through organizations. So we have people who are in a younger generation, and they are committed not just to a career path. Often they are committed to a portfolio, not a career necessarily, but a portfolio of interests. So they want to be dedicated in their career, but they also want to be dedicated in their family. They want to be dedicated to an environmental cause or to something in their community, or they've got other interests that they're not just spinning here as a hobby any longer. So my generation grew up with hobbies, but this generation X, Y, Z and the millennials, they're kind of they're more purpose driven. That purpose includes a wider range of things. So when you are attracting key talent, I think the ability to talk about how you not just offer a good salary, but you offer flexibility. You understand what they're looking for, and so any disruption that is happening now is a great platform for setting you up for that sort of conversation in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, I think, giving people the opportunity to be mindful is really important in that regard. Now, we must move on, because we said that we'd talk about how we can use mindfulness in our relationships with other people. And particularly, we've got lots of different people in our lives. We've got family, we've got children, we've got clients, of course, and we've got our staff members and our colleagues. So what are some of the things that you'd say in and around that particular aspect, particularly with the relevance to COVID, because obviously everything's changed in that regard?
Yeah. So again, I'm just going to do a shout out to everybody who's still on the webinar with us. I would like some questions from them, because it's just you and I chatting, and the whole idea of this was to have
of course
all voices in the room.
Please use that chat function if you like.
A big shout out to everybody who's online. So I particularly want to talk about clients, because I think that people who are on this webinar will have a really privileged relationship with clients. They're relying on you. So there will be a level of trust and rapport that you want to develop, but also can be very helpful. It's pretty much what we were talking about, but I think that it's just, again, being more conscious of some of this, so that when you start conversations with clients, it's now okay to say, how are you? It's now okay to really show that you are human and concerned, and that you have time to listen to their situation. And I think this is incredibly important, because it's incredibly good for your business, and I think it's also just the wise, kind and compassionate thing to do. So I would say, when you are talking to clients, think about how you do some sharing, or allow them to do some sharing. And of course, I understand that billable time is important, and I understand that different people will have a different answer to should that time be billable, and I have no comment on that. But I think that beyond the billable question is the question of helping us all, and that's really important. So being mindful simply means, in this case, being considerate about the other human being who's on the end of this. And when you do ask the question, you're not asking in a half-hearted, tick box kind of way. Okay, that's my duty done that, let's move on. How quickly can I get them onto the real business that we're talking about?
Yes.
So I think that's really important, to show up. That's a key mindfulness concept. Yeah, I think there's other considerations for other people. Again, I heard somebody talking about their relationship with their kids, and I heard other people talking about their relationship with their partners. Clearly, under pressure, all of these things are fraying a bit.
Yes.
And the most important question I heard asked in that podcast was, what's the best thing you can do for the relationship? So it's not what's the right thing to do. It's now, how do you use your interaction to help you keep that relationship intact and working? Because if you keep it intact and working, then when we come out of this, you know, then you can look at what's right or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think
yeah.
foregrounding trust and rapport, which is at the heart of the legal profession. I seem to recall my husband has cited something to me at some point about trust and trust and confidence, he calls it. That's right. But I'm calling it trust and rapport. I think it is about rapport.
Yeah, absolutely. That is great advice. Now we've got a comment here from one of the participants who said something around the fact that they used to use their commute as a kind of a happy place to think, because they're in the car on their own and the music's in and they're probably driving in a nice quiet place, I imagine, not on a rush hour, and that's all changed now. So they've got this situation where, in fact, they're always at home, and when they're at home, there's always kids, I would imagine, and family and other sorts of things. And so even when they're exercising, you can't escape. It's with you the whole time. So what would you recommend in that sort of circumstance?
Yeah. So I've got three. I'm just going to quick fire three things at you. So number one, take some time for yourself. When you go to the loo, shut the door, lock it, sit on the loo, and take it as a mindful break. Honestly, again, back to 2012 when we were doing the Olympics, people actually said to me, the only time I get time to myself is when I go to the toilet. So I went, that's it, just there. Nobody's timing your loo break. Nobody's saying, oi, you've been in there 10 seconds longer. So honestly, it is, take 1 extra minute. I promise you, if I ask you to shut your eyes and I set a timer for a minute, you will be amazed how long a minute is, really, and how much difference it makes. So it really can bring you down. So number one, go to the loo, lock the door, spend an extra minute there. Number two, take the kids for a mindful walk. Now, what does a mindful walk look like with kids? Firstly, you turn it into a game. You might invite them to do the walk in silence. So it's, up to you, but this is quite fun. I have done this with primary school kids, so I know it can work. And you ask them to walk around the garden or the house or wherever you are, simply noticing how many things they can notice and remember. So they're not allowed to shout them out, but when you get back indoors and sit down, you can then just say, what did you notice? And actually the very the sort of musculature in your mind of remembering, I saw that green, I saw that butterfly, I saw that piece of dust, that actually it's pollen probably, and I saw, a caterpillar and something else and something else. That really engages kids. They're very curious, and curiosity again helps to widen our brain, helps to increase the data and calm them. And then the last one is, there's great videos on the YouTube for kids, and you can sit with your kids and do some mindfulness from YouTube.
Yes.
So again, just include them, and I'd say that in, that's the other thing, in conference calls or something where you're at work and the kids come in and they're, around you. Again, don't be embarrassed by that. If you add stress to the situation by going, get out, kids, I'm on video, kids, I'm busy, that just ramps up and up. So it's just, I read some guy said to somebody once, he said, they were so boisterous, I just sat my 3-year-old on my knee and let her see what we were doing, and she decided it was so boring she got off her knee and walked out, because to them we are boring. But as soon as you make it into a fight, now fighting's not boring.
Of course.
As I say, I'm not a parent, but I've been learning all of this by watching others.
Superb, thank you. Jenny, we, would you believe, have been talking for 60 minutes, and I know that we're going to run this mindfulness session now, but there'll be many on the webinar who've only given an hour to watch us, and so to you, if you do need to disappear, a big thank you to you.
I plug my book.
Yes, oh, sorry, Jenny, I forgot to mention, and this is the last part that we didn't get to, but absolutely, Jenny has written this book. That's what it's called. Coaching on the Go, How to Lead Your Team Effectively in 10 Minutes. It's available on Amazon and it's well worth a read. Jenny, you showed me through a couple of things in there which I thought were absolutely brilliant. Some stuff that's really useful to us as leaders. Do you just want to show me that page that you showed me before?
So the thing I'm proudest of in this book is that I literally brainstormed all the things that have tripped me up as a leader, right?
Yes.
And they come up again and again and again. So I just wrote a big table. Okay, so somebody keeps giving me work that is suboptimal, it's consistently late, it's not good enough, or they've fobbed it off to somebody else. Look up page 43. I've got somebody in my team who's lacking commitment and motivation. Look up page 89. I've got conflict between my team members. Look up page 106. So I'm desperately proud of this because that's one of the reasons this is 10 minutes a day, because we literally talk you through different things that come up and how to fix it.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I thoroughly recommend that you do that. You can see from the value of today's session just how much we've covered, and that's just in 60 minutes. We've barely touched the sides of what Jenny could talk about, as you probably realised. So thank you to you for participating in this webinar. Please stick around if you'd like to be involved in the mindfulness session. Jenny, before everybody goes, a big thank you to you. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I know that the participants would have got a lot out of that. And I hope, actually, to be honest, that we can do some follow-up webinars perhaps in the time to come, because things are going to evolve, things are going to change. We're going to have different pressures and different challenges, and using mindfulness to approach and deal with those.
I would love that. Just call me up. I'd love that.
Brilliant.
Oh, can I give a plug to my website? So websites are www.coachingonthego.co.uk. Got all sorts of resources. So it's Coaching on the Go, same as the book, coachingonthego.co.uk, or mindfulness@hinton.uk.
Brilliant. Yeah, and actually on that mindfulness at Hinton.co.uk, isn't it?
No, it's just UK. Yeah, it's the UK.
Yes. So there you've got a whole lot of free resources. So, so if you're interested in exploring some more and reading, then do jump on Jenny's site, because there's a whole lot of stuff there that you can access for free. Jenny's very much about wanting to help people. It's yes, you got to make money, yes, you got to make a living, but actually it's about a wider purpose and a wider calling than that, and so that's why all that is available for you there. So many thanks to everybody for participating. That ends the formal part of the webinar. Let's get stuck into something that the people can take away with them, Jenny, so we'll leave it with you.
Okay, so I'm going to teach you 2 or 3 little things, and the point is that you just need to figure out what works for you, right? So there's no right thing. It's just, does it work for you? Okay, so just shake your hands. Don't hurt yourself, but shake your hands. And you can keep your eyes open, but now just hold them. And put your mind in your hands. So because you've been shaking, you might find there's lots of fizzing and tingling. See if you can find the fingers, but also see if you can find the gaps between the fingers. So it's not just what's there, it's what's not there. This is part of the mindful muscle, is to notice what you're not noticing. And now widen your attention beyond your hands to the rest of your body. So just notice how the rest of your body is. So again, it's just pushing you to notice things. Okay. So when you're ready, just let your hands drop to your lap. If you'd like to shut your eyes, please do. If you don't want to shut your eyes, that's fine. It's not required. Right, pour your mind into your feet. So that's a really strange instruction, but it's not thinking about your feet. It's really having the experience of feet. Feet touching the floor. In the same way as you felt your fingers from the inside, feel your feet from the inside. And see if you can find all the parts of the foot. So not by wiggling or moving, but simply by placing attention. This is absolutely about keeping your focus, as if you've got a searchlight. So just turn the searchlight of your mind into your feet. Find your toes. Find the ball of your feet. Find the arch of your feet. And find your heels. And now widen your spotlight so you can feel all of that all together. Now, what generally happens when we start all of this is there's a screaming voice in our head going, this is baloney, I don't understand it, what are we doing, I can't find it, this doesn't work. So that is the exquisite nature of mindfulness, is it shows us our mind. And there it is, that critical, nagging, judging voice is part of what we discover. But we also discover that we don't have to be held captive to that voice. So stay with your feet, stay with your feet. Now move your mind directly to your breath, as if the breath was a little factory, little process in the factory. There's a breath in, there's a pause, there's a breath out, there's a pause. So watching the factory of your breath. And if your mind wanders away, just bring it back. So a focused mind is a happy mind. One of the parts of the training is to learn how much your mind wants to deviate and how much your mind wants to jump away. Just stay exactly on the breath. Okay, and just take one or two slightly deeper breaths. Wiggle your fingers and toes and come back. So there's a few things there. One is, just movement will bring your mind to the place of movement. Stillness is a great way of noticing what's there, but noticing what's not there. And the breath is always a very good indicator of your stress levels. So you'll begin to notice. So it's not like yoga. We're not trying to change the breath. We're not trying to make it deep and long. We're just noticing it. And that's another way of noticing, how am I? And when we understand how we are, we can respond more carefully and more intelligently to the circumstances, rather than suddenly realizing that actually we're not very good and we're going to break or something, you know, make silly judgments. That's when that happens. Okay, thank you so much. I think I've overstayed my welcome.
Jenny, thank you again. That is absolutely brilliant. A lovely way to finish. That is a great technique when we're all so struggling at times with stress, to be able to have something practical like that we can put into place, perhaps sitting on the loo or wherever, but you know, the main thing is that we now know how to do it, and we can do that at any time, and it only takes a couple of minutes. Thank you so much from me at Arken.legal and all the participants. To everybody
all the very best. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Lovely to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.